She is the proprietor and managing director of one of the largest law firms in the corporate sector in Singapore, the Global Law Alliance, which is internationally known and respected. Sharmila has also played a very active part in the public life of Singapore. Many of us have read her famous interview with the iconic Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. And I don't know how many of you are aware of that the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew made Sharmila's interview compulsory reading for all the members of Parliament of this party. Prime Minister Goh Tok Chong, who succeeded Lee Kuan Yew, was also a great friend and admirer of Sharmila and encouraged her to be an ambassador of South Asian culture in distant lands. Sharmila is into Bharatanatyam, and her performance in Amrapali, that is based on a legendary love story set in the 6th century BC. She was going to perform in this country. Date had already been fixed with His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa. This was going to happen in Colombo on the 18th of December. But we have decided to postpone that event because that was be soon after the Sri Lankan presidential elections. It will be roughly 3 weeks after the presidential election, so that will not be the next time. And therefore, we are looking forward to this event in the early months of next year. So, it is my pleasure now cordially to invite Sharmila to make to give her own candid assessment of what this centre can be expected to do under current circumstances. And I'm sure that she will present her perspective not only from a national standpoint, but in the context of broader developments in the South Asian region as a whole.
Thank you, Professor Pires, for those very generous comments. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have been invited to speak at this distinguished forum organized by the Mahinda Rajapaksa Center. And my topic that I agreed with Professor Pires that I would talk on is the role a think tank can play in nation building and international relations. From my perspective, as a Singaporean by birth and nationality, and as a senior member of the Singapore legal profession, we have a saying in Tamil, Anneyum Pidavum Munnari Devam, which in essence means that one's mother and father are revered first before anything else in life. My parents were Sri Lankan, and my driving force for being here this evening is also my devotion for them. Now, I would like to pay a tribute now to His Excellency Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. He needs no introduction. He has been a former Prime Minister, the 5th Executive President of Sri Lanka, and is currently leader of the opposition, having been involved in politics since he was 24 as Sri Lanka's youngest ever Member of Parliament. He started out life as a practicing lawyer and hails from a family of politicians. People, and in particular the working classes, are his highest priority. And I quote from a publication when he says, "High growth rates per se are not important if the benefits of development do not reach the villages where more than 70% of the people live." His Excellency can also be credited for the redevelopment of the historic region of Ruhunu in southern Sri Lanka. His achievements are too many, but amongst them is the fact that in 2009, the government he headed brought an end to a 30-year civil war, for which he has no doubt gone down in the annals of world history. Now also present, and you've heard him speak, Honorable G.L. Pires, who's helping to spearhead initiatives for the center. He's a Rhodes Scholar, holds a doctorate in philosophy from Oxford University, in addition to a first-class honours law degree obtained in Sri Lanka. He became professor and dean of the Law School of the University of Colombo, then vice-chancellor of the university as well. Having been appointed as a Sri Lankan cabinet minister in 1994, he has held several important posts in the government, and his articles are highly acclaimed both in Sri Lanka and internationally. Now, it won't have escaped your notice that both His Excellency, Professor Pires, and many others that I see in this room have legal backgrounds, but they are also political figures, and it is not uncommon for political figures to be involved in think tanks. I'm only a lawyer, heading up a corporate law firm in Singapore, so you may ask, what have lawyers like me got to do with think tanks? What is the connection? It's actually not uncommon for law firms to have connections to think tanks on forums for discussion on public policy. For example, my law firm, in association with the Washington firm of Dentons, who has one of the premier lobby practices in the world, and is now the largest law firm in the world, had worked together on the Washington Asian Initiative, which focused on the US global role and its ramifications for Asia. Another US law firm, Baker Donaldson, operates its own in-house think tank, the Howard Baker Forum, named after the former White House Chief of Staff. Plans are underway for my law firm to work with them on a possible cybersecurity seminar in Singapore, which will involve Professor Rohan Gunaratne. Which brings us back to the main topic, the role a think tank can play in nation building and international relations. I would like, if I may, to start with nation building in the Singapore context, which is what I probably know best. How have think tanks contributed to nation building in our tiny city-state? On the recent 50th anniversary of the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies, Singapore's Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, explained that to survive as a small country, Singapore needed to be aware of the surrounding regions. As he put it, small countries do not shape world events. Events shape us. At the moment of independence, Singapore was facing a pretty hostile environment. It had recently separated amidst some acrimony from Malaysia. Confrontasi with Indonesia was barely over, and several nearby countries faced communist insurgencies. However, the then Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, Goh Keng Swee, persuaded Parliament to support a research institution to study Southeast Asia. And so in 1968, the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies was formed. It didn't cater just to cabinet members. It fostered objective reasoning amongst government officials, the financial and business community, the media, and other professionals, and the intelligentsia in general. Dr. Goh believed that expertise had to be developed outside government with a long-term and detached perspective. The Institute could then provide the government with independent insights looking through alternative lenses. The Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, with its affiliations to think tanks, and the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, RSIS, have both domestic nation-building agendas as well as agendas regarding international affairs. The Rajaratnam School of International Studies, again, which is in abbreviated form RSIS, is named after S. Rajaratnam, who was born in Sri Lanka, or Ceylon as it was then called, and was one of the most distinguished of Singapore's pioneer political leaders. It was he who coined the National Pledge of Singapore, a commitment to multiculturalism, regardless of race, language, or religion, recited in Singapore schools and on important occasions such as Singapore's National Day. RSIS recently held an international conference on cohesive societies with a focus on the theme, Many Communities, One Shared Future. The key point about the output of these think tanks is that it's evidence-based. There are observers outside Singapore inclined to see its style of government as authoritarian or top-down. But this is to miss the point that political initiatives in Singapore are the result of extensive, rigorous analysis. Think tanks are not the product, in my view, of a dictatorial political whim. Think tanks, at least in Singapore's experience, I believe, serve as vital sounding boards for domestic policymakers. So we go on then to the realm of international relations, which is the second part of my topic. Think tanks, I believe, can provide a useful supplement to formal diplomacy. Informal diplomacy, in other words, may involve participating in activities that are semi or fully autonomous from the official foreign policy apparatus. In this connection, I should mention the book, The New Asian Hemisphere, The Irresistible Shift of Global Power to the East, written and released by Kishore Mahbubani while he was Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School. Professor Mahbubani, as many of you may know, was a diplomat, a former permanent secretary in the Foreign Ministry, and Singapore's permanent representative to the United Nations. He had some tough messages. Global power, he said, is shifting eastwards after centuries of Western domination. In his address at the Carnegie Council in New York, Mahbubani stressed the need for a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, warning, and I quote, that there must be political will to deliver the two-state solution the Middle East needs. He said, and I quote, "Every day that you delay the two-state solution, the political cost doesn't just affect 6 million Israelis, 4 million Palestinians. It affects the whole world because 1.2 billion Muslims look at it and feel the humiliation every day." So you're creating global anger for no apparent reason, he says. What is to be noted here, ladies and gentlemen, is that these statements made by Professor Mahbubani were done while he was Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School. Ladies and gentlemen, Singapore and Sri Lanka are both island nations, former British colonies, and inheritors of the Westminster tradition of liberal democracy. They also have ethnically diverse populations and consequent challenges to nation building. It is regrettable that in some democracies, oppositional parliamentary sessions are on occasions fraught with adversarial and emotionally charged debates, which can deter the process of nation building. A third party, in the form of think tanks, in my view, can provide timely, non-adversarial insights in this case. Singapore, I think, may be an interesting case study for a think tank studying nation building in multiracial societies. And why do I believe so? When the British left Singapore, it was fortunate that we had visionary leaders like Honorable Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who had the political will to keep English as the language of administration instead of implementing nationalistic policies relating to language. So, in a sense, English became a link language between the various communities in Singapore, and in a sense gave Singaporeans a competitive edge in the global economy. Of course, we have strong policies on mother tongue. Every school-going child has to learn mother tongue, and the standards are extremely high. Secondly, Singapore maintained the rule of law and good governance and the incorruptibility of public institutions. Singapore's leadership was careful to keep the Pandora's box shut by not pandering to its majority Chinese race to win votes. It's probably well known that Singapore's ethnic makeup is over 74% Chinese, over 13% Malay, and 9% Indians. And yet, our national anthem is in Malay, our current president, is a Malay Muslim. I remember here clearly the words of a departed soul who was very dear to me and many of us when he said in an interview on Singapore's national TV, "Fundamentalism, sectarianism, politics of religion or race will destroy the foundations of a civic society. There must be limits to political behavior which prevents voters from being wooed on grounds relating to race and religion, as it has the power to destroy the nation's political stability." Singapore has today been rated as a major medical, leisure and education hub and consistently been ranked as having the two best universities in Asia. Both Singapore Airport and Singapore Airlines have come up first in rankings time and time again. I'm not just boasting here about Singapore. I'm just highlighting some of the factors which led to Singapore's stability and may be useful in any case study undertaken by a think tank. Looking at the future, next year Singapore and Sri Lanka, I understand, will celebrate 50 years of diplomatic relations. Sri Lanka is at an important point in its history. Having put years of civil strife behind it, it faces a challenge similar to Singapore, to integrate a racially and culturally diverse nation into a coherent whole. Substantially nothing is perfect. Singapore has succeeded, and it is largely because of the political will of its leaders to maintain racial harmony amongst its different ethnic races, which led to internal stability and its leap from third world to first world. When it comes to the future, however, it is still work in progress and nothing can be taken for granted. I would like to mention here that Singapore's Parliament on 8th May 2019 passed the Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Bill to combat the spread of inflammatory or divisive falsehoods online that may threaten internal stability. It was explained by Singapore's Minister for Law and Home Affairs, Mr. Sharmila, that disinformation through online falsehood could be weaponized against Singapore. The passing of this bill will prevent and curtail online falsehoods, which in the view of the government are detrimental to public safety, Singapore's relations with other nations, and the security of Singapore. Amid the prevalence of identity politics and hate speech on social media, the Singapore government also intends to amend the current Maintenance of Religious Harmony Act through the involvement of key stakeholders such as religious leaders and, of course, the people of Singapore. The amendments to the Act being considered will allow the Singapore government to issue restraining orders against those making derogatory remarks about religions in the new information age. We, the citizens of Singapore, will also need to have the wisdom at our next general election to vote in a government which is committed to multiracial, multi-religious, and meritocracy, as they are key factors in nation building and will give us the desired standing in the international community. In the final analysis, internal security is what will help drive an economy, will result in an influx of foreign investment, increased employment, and so many other economic benefits, which I believe political leaders and economists can best comment on. Finally, before I end my remarks today, I've been asked by many individuals to make reference to the fact that after his tenure as economic advisor to the late President J.R. Jayawarden, first executive president of Sri Lanka, my late father Kanagaratnam Gunasingham set up the Institute of Indo-Pacific Studies in 1992. He argued at a prestigious forum in Singapore way back then that it was a mistake for global leaders to think in terms of an Asia linked to the Pacific, which blanked out or ignored an Asia linked to the Indian Ocean or the Indian subcontinent. Given the dynamics he predicted that would take place in the years ahead, with the increased prominence of the term Indo-Pacific being used by the American, Japanese, and Indian governments. My late father has been classified as a visionary along with Professor G.L. Piris and others who joined the advisory council of the Institute 20 years ago. In other words, these gentlemen from Sri Lanka had the foresight to recognize the inevitable emergence of an Indo-Pacific region way back then. Of course, in today's context, it would be relevant to study the implications of China's Belt and Road policy, the United States Free and Open Indo-Pacific Initiative, and the newly released ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not wish to exceed the time allocated to me for my opening remarks today. I wish all speakers the greatest success as they discuss and share their expertise on the selected topic relating to the Indian Ocean. With the legacy of His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa as the centre's cornerstone, the expertise of Honourable Professor G.L. Piris, and all esteemed members of the centre, including Janaka, Namala Chandra, I do believe that research and innovations in Sri Lanka will continue to uplift people's lives to the fullest. I wish you every success during this important time in Sri Lanka's history as you join together to build one nation, one people, one Sri Lanka. Thank you, and I wish everyone a very good evening.